Hi, I'm Zach, the WordPress teacher here at Treehouse, and today we're going to do a workshop on creating custom loops with WP Query. To start off, let's take a look and a review at what is a loop inside of WordPress. The loop is some code that goes inside of a template file. What this code does is first checks to see if there are any post or page content available, and then if there is, it will include the markup needed to display that content. This loop is also quite intelligent and can automatically figure out whether it's post content or page content, or whether it's displaying an excerpt or displaying a full post. Let's take a look at what the code for an actual conventional loop looks like. We can see that it starts off with the basic if statement checking to see if we have any posts. It'll then go forward, and while there are posts available, it will repeat the following code. So what this means is that if we're looking at a selection of posts, then all of those posts will be looped through over and over like you would see on a Meg blog listing page. However, if we're just dealing with a single blog post, then it will only repeat that code once and only show that one blog post. The next little bit of code here, where it shows the post, is where WordPress gathers all of the data about the post itself, such as the title and the content, and then we have it displayed below here. We can see then that the while statement ends, and an else statement begins saying that if there are no posts, display some sort of content there, explaining what's going on or saying that, there's no content available, please try searching or something else like that. So this is our basic loop. However, there are times when this basic loop isn't quite enough, and what we need to do is customize the loop to give us more specifically tailored content or information. This is where WP Query comes in handy. The WP Query function goes right before our loop. It accepts a whole range of different parameters, and these parameters work together to customize the loop. This WP Query function is quite powerful, and it can do anything from find certain author posts, to find posts with certain categories, to certain posts with certain words inside of them, and a whole range of things that we're going to look at now. Before we do that, let's go ahead and get set up. I have a few things working here that you'll need if you want to follow along with this video. The first one is you're going to need to have WordPress installed. I have it installed here on a local server, which is perfect. The next thing is that you'll need to come in, and in our case, I have a plugin running called WP Example Content. And what this does is gives me a bunch of dummy posts and pages so I don't have to. The other plugins that we're going to need are the Custom Post Types UI plugin, as well as the Advanced Customs Field plugin. So we can see we have our basic local WordPress install, we have our example content, we have the Custom Fields plugin, a Custom Post Types UI plugin, and the last thing we need is a 2012 child theme. If you haven't created a child theme before, it's a very simple way to build a new theme off of an existing one. So we'll be working with the 2012 WordPress theme, but instead of editing the core files, we're going to create a quick child theme. And here's how you do that. To start off, you'll come into the folder that has your WordPress installed. You're going to navigate into WP Content, into Themes, and then where you would see your 2011 and 2012 theme, you're going to create a new blank folder called WP Query. And this folder is going to serve as our template folder. Then inside of there, you only need one file to start off with, and that's the style.css file. This style.css file needs a little bit of code inside of it that looks like this, and we're going to make this available from the project download, so you don't have to type all of this yourself, but you can see it's pretty simple. And when we set this theme up, we need a name, a description, we'll have our author, and then the version that we're using, as well as what template we want our child theme to be based off of. This is really important, as is the first import rule to bring in all of the 2012 styles. If we jump into our control panel then and look under Appearance at our themes, we can see that our current theme enabled is this WP Query theme. We don't have a screenshot, but all the other information is there, and when we view our site, it looks just like the 2012 theme, except for places that we're going to customize. So that gives us everything that we need to get set up to start with. So now that we have everything set up, let's look at how all of this works. To do this, we're going to make a child duplicate of the page.php file from our main 2012 theme. Let's go ahead and get that set up now. To do this, we're going to come into our theme, and I'm going to open up my entire themes folder inside of Sublime Text 2, my text editor. So now that I have this open up, I can go inside of 2012. I'm going to open up my page.php file, and I'm going to do a simple save as, find my WP Query folder, and save my page.php file into that. Now we have our basic page.php file that I'm going to customize to turn it into a custom template. So when we create a custom template in WordPress, what we do is we add a comment at the top that says the template name is equal to whatever we want to name it. Then we're going to create a page in WordPress to test all of our custom queries on. And finally, we'll go into that page and select the WP Query template to work with that page. So the first thing we need in our template is the name of the template. So we're going to call this our WP Query template. And now that we have this saved, we can go back into WordPress and we could assign it to a specific page. However, the naming convention that I've used here isn't quite correct, and instead of calling this page.php, I have to give it another name. And the reason I have to do that is because the page.php template will be used in WordPress for all of the pages, and I just want a custom page template that's just being used for ours. So what I need to do now is rename this so that it has something different than just page.php. So I'm going to do a save as again, and I'm going to change this page name to be called wpquery.php. Now that we have our template set up, let's come back into WordPress, and you're going to create a new page called WP Query. Now I've already created this page here, and you can see that what I have is a title called WP Query, and then a content box saying, here is the custom WP Query test page. The next thing we need to do is come down over to the template and select our WP Query template from this drop-down list here. Now we can click Update or Publish in your case and go to view that page. So what we should see now is we should see the name of the page and the basic content on the page. And we also know that we have a custom template set up that we can begin customizing to test out our WP Query functions. So now we have our child page set up. Before we move into talking about the WP Query function, it's important to talk about the need to reset post data. What happens in WordPress is that when we run a loop on a page and then try to run a second loop on the page, the data from the two loops will get mixed up. So what we need to do when we're displaying one loop and then another is to tell WordPress, hey, we want to reset all of this data to start our new loop. So before we add a custom WP Query function below the normal loop on the page, we'll need to add a little bit of code that does this resetting of the loop. Next, we'll look at how to specifically add in the code needed for the WP Query. So let's take a look at that now. We can see here the basic example of what the WP Query function looks like. It either starts or it ends with WP reset post data. Now I have this commented out here because we're not sure yet whether we're going to need to reset the loop before our custom query or whether we're going to need to reset the loop after. You don't need to do it every single time, but if you know that there will be a place that you're running two loops, you need to make sure that you reset that data in between those points. So we have our code set up here to be prepared for either way of doing that. The next thing we see when we come down here are the arguments for the WP query. Now we'll take a look at all of these in a moment, but you could see two basic ones here, which are get everything of a certain post type that's set to post. So this will get all of our posts. And then post per pages is another way of saying limit, or how many results you want returned. We then come down and we see the actual WP query function in work here being assigned to a new variable called the query. So our arguments are passed into the WP query function and saved as the query. Then below the query is where we would see all of our basic loop go. Okay? So now that we have our reset code ready and we have our WP query function basic outline and form ready to go, let's take a look at all of the possible parameters that we could use in the WP codex. If we come over to the WP codex, we can see that it has a whole section on WP query. And you can get to it by codex.wordpress.org/class reference WP_query, or just a quick Google search of WP query should get you here as well. The part we're interested for this specific example are the parameters. And if we look through the parameters, we can see that we have parameters based off of the author, category and tags, taxonomy, post and pages and search parameters, post type, statuses, pagination, order by, sticky, one set to a certain time, involving custom fields, permissions, caching, and finally return fields. So these are a lot of different parameters that we could use, but we're going to take a look at a few specific examples that are often used again and again through different WordPress sites. Here are some of the examples we're going to look at. Let's start off by looking at how to pull in just posts assigned to a specific category. To do this, we'll come back into our code and we're going to copy our query example and paste it into our WP query page just below the normal page loop. So we're going to leave in all of the code that displays the actual content for our WP query page. So if we look back on our WP query page where it says here's the custom WP query test page, that is what's being generated right here. Then below that, we're going to come down and generate some of our own custom content. Because the loop is up here and our custom content is down here, we'll need to uncomment and use this WP reset post data, which will reset the previous loop and get us set up ready to use WP query down here. That means that we could also delete that. Now that we have the WP query set up, we also need to add a new loop below it, which we could do by copying and pasting this loop and bringing it down here. There'll be a few things that we change once we get to outputting the data, but first let's come back into our arguments and look at how to select arguments based on the category of a post. So we'll come into our WP query function reference here in the codex, and we're going to look at this for categories. So we see that there are two easy ways to look up categories. One is we could use the category ID, or we could use the category name. Let's go ahead and go into WordPress and set up some categories. We'll set up one category for music, and we'll set up another category for art. Then we'll come into our posts and make sure that we have a few posts associated with each one. So this post we'll have associated with both, this one just with art, this one just with music, and we'll do another just with music. Okay, so we now have some posts with music, we now have some posts with art, and we can begin to play with pulling in these two different types. So we'll come back to our site and go to our WP query page. And down here is where we should begin to see our results. So in our category reference, it gives us this option for category ID and category name. Since we know the name of our categories are either art or music, this one's going to be pretty simple to use. So let's go ahead and try it out using the category underscore name parameter. We'll go ahead and copy category underscore name, bring it into our template, and then just say music. Since we're only worried about this one parameter, we can go ahead and delete the other ones. We also have to do some updating down here to our new loop. And what we need to do is, in front of the have posts, we need to add the object for the query. So what this is telling WordPress is that instead of just searching all posts, only search those that are defined here by WP query and the arguments we've set up. We do the same thing in front of the underscore post. Turn on some word wrapping there. Now we get the template part, that's correct, but we don't need the comments template, so let's go ahead and remove that from here. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and remove it up top here, just to keep our page simple. So now when we come back and we look at our WP query page, we can see that we now have some results displaying below. We had asked that those be set to category of music, and if we go back into and check all of our posts, we could see that the ones associated with music were UL and OL, as well as headers post and the multiple paragraphs post. We come back to our WP query page, we could see that we have those displaying. Let's try briefly to change that to art, and we could see that those change as well. So that's a quick example on how to change stuff using categories, and the tags format is the exact same, so we're not going to look at that in depth, but you could see a way to approach that. The next one we're going to do is an interesting one using a search keyword where we could search for posts that have specific content in it based on a keyword. So let's go ahead and do that now. If we come back down in our documentation here, under tags, we have a search parameter here that uses the parameter s as well as a given keyword. So if we come into our posts, actually let's search our pages this time, and let's see if we could find some specific content here. And again, let's just use these same keywords of music. So we'll add in music a few places into some of our pages and posts and see if we can find ones that reference that and it finds the correct posts for us. We're just going to add the word music on a few lines here. This could be to any page. Save that page. Come into another page here. Add in the word music a few times. Save that. And we'll come into one post and we'll give it the title with the word music in it. And then let's come back and look at our WP query page again. Okay. So this time we're going to use the parameter s followed by the keyword we want, which is music. So we'll change category name to s, and then this we will change to the word music, and hopefully everything should work properly. Come back and refresh our page, and we could see it pulled in the post that says music. It pulled in our other posts that have the word music, as well as our final post. So that worked properly, and you could think of a lot of situations where this could be pretty interesting, where you know that you have certain key terms in certain posts, and you want to pull all of them in and list them on a certain page. This parameter can be very helpful. What we're going to be doing next is looking at an example for how to pull in custom post types. This is really popular, and the reason that we installed all of those plugins at the beginning to set up custom post types and custom fields. I went ahead and set one up, and what we're going to look at now is how to get the content set up so that we could pull it in, and then how to pull it in our templates. So what we're going to be going after here is the ability to pull in custom posts directly onto a template using the WP query function. To get set up, I first created a custom post type called projects. And this is a basic custom post type that you would expect to see on something like a portfolio site. Next, under Custom Fields, I created a custom field group for these projects and just put something called the project outline, given a field name of project outline. I then set the rules to say that when the posts are equal to projects, that is what we're going to be using. So if I come into my projects area here, I can see that I have one project with some content created here, and that's what we're going to be wanting to search for. So if you set up custom post types on your site a little bit differently, you name them differently, that's okay. You'll just be able to switch out those values and you should be able to get your custom content. So we'll be using our post type parameter, and that simply takes the value of post_type and then the post type that you want. So in this case, we're going to get one called projects. And if I come back and I refresh my basic WP query page, I should see that I have my project listed here. Now, I don't have the fields to this project listed because it's using custom fields, and my current loop is only using the content. So I'm not seeing all of the data show up here, but I am seeing that it's successfully pulling this in. And I'll repeat, this is something that's very helpful. Anytime you want to pull in custom post types, this is the parameter that you're going to use to do that. Next, let's look at a few examples using WordPress's ability to target just specific posts or pages or a specific post or page on the site. This is going to be using WordPress's post and page parameters, and you can see that we have a couple options. We have the simple parameter of p just to get the ID, or we could use name, which will use the post slug, or page name for the page slug. In WordPress, it doesn't distinguish too much in the database between what is post and what is page content. So we could see that these parameters work very closely with each other in terms of the similarity between these two types of content. So let's go ahead and try to first pull up a specific page just based on ID. We'll go ahead and do this randomly. We'll come back into posts, click on a post, and then up in the URL, we could see the ID for it. So I'm looking at ID of 7. It'll be a little bit different for you depending on which one you pull up. So we'll set this to 7. And when we're working with this format in arrays, we don't need to put our numbers into a string format. So if we're ever listing a number here, we just put the number out raw without having to put quotation marks around it, and that'll work perfectly. So we're telling WordPress to get number 7. And I'm just going to open up a new tab here and keep WP Query open. And I can see that it's pulled in the blog post, which is ID number 7. So perfect, that's working great. Now let's come and try one that uses the name of the slug. Now using the name of the slug isn't going to work the way we have this set up. And the reason is because we don't yet have slugs associated to our posts, because we're working with a permalink structure that doesn't use them. However, if we come into our permalinks, turn on the ability to have post names and slugs, come back into our posts, then we should be able to search all of this stuff using the WP query. So let's go ahead and set up our permalinks this way now. So we'll come under Settings and click on Permalinks, click on the post name structure, and save our changes. And then if we come back into our posts and click on a post, we can see that we now have a slug name. So let's try to search for this one that is image post. Come down in here and we'll type name, image post, and refresh our page, and there we have image post. Pretty simple. We could do the same thing for page. We have our headers page. But when we refresh that, we see that nothing appears. The reason for this is that WordPress has different parameters based on whether you're looking for a post name or a page name. So if we come back into the documentation, we can see that name is only used for a post slug, whereas page name is only used for a page slug. We have the same difference between P and page ID for post versus page ID. So if we keep the same structure and type in page name, come back to our WP query, we could see we now have the correct post showing up. Now we also have some other options here and types of examples where we could look at posts of a different status, we could get the random order of things, we could change how things are displayed. So let's just go ahead and look at a few last examples here before we wrap up. One of the things that's common that people want to do is display a random post. So let's look at how to order these in a random way and then display just a single one of them. If we want to work with changing the order of posts, we need to look at the order and order by parameters. So if we come down to our order and order by parameters, we can see that they're two different things. The order determines whether something is in ascending or descending order, meaning it starts at the lowest and goes to highest for ascending, or starts at the highest and then goes to the lowest, and then what you're ordering by. So these two can be used together. So since we said that we want to have randomly ordered posts, under order by, we're going to look for a value of random. So we could see that if we look under order by, we have this option of random or rand. So let's go ahead and use this in our query. We'll enter in order by here, and then we'll put rand. Then we're going to use a parameter called posts per page and set that to just 1. So this should randomly generate a single post to display here. We could see though that we're getting an error message that tells us something is wrong, and what we're missing here is a comma in between our two values. We come back, we refresh that, and we could see that we have our block quote post. If we refresh that page again, we get a different post on and on and on. Now let's say that we wanted to order all of these by title instead of by date. If we changed order by title, it should pull in all of the posts on our site and begin ordering them by the title. And we can see that we have B at the end here and U at the top. If we were to change this, we could say order is equal to ascending. Now we have our block quote post at the top and the alphabetical descending down. Let's look at one last one here, which is that involving date range. Inside of these parameters, there's one called the time parameters. And what this lets us do is set the specific year, month, week, day, hour, or time that we want to query. What you could do using this is say, hey, I want all of the posts in May, or I want all of the posts from this day of the month, or all of the posts in this given year. One of the little tricks it shows you how to do here, for example, is how is to get all of the certain posts for a given week. So let's look at this, and if we come down, we can see that what they're going to do here is they're going to set up a few variables for week and year using the date function in PHP. They can then pass these variables into the query to get it to display everything from the following week. So let's try this one out, and it's going to involve a few more steps than the last one, so we'll kind of close with something that's a little bit more complex. If we come back into our code, we're first going to need to set up our variables. So we have week and year that we copied straight from the codex there. And then we're going to come back and we can see that we have a year parameter and a W parameter. So year and W for week. So we'll change this to year and we'll change this to W. And we're going to enter in our variables here of year and week. Now we could save that, come back onto our page, and we can see that we have a lot of these posts showing up, but how are we going to know that they're all done in this week? Let's try coming into the multiple paragraph post and make sure that we set that to a date that was way before this week. Let's set it to a couple years ago. So when we update our multiple paragraph post, we should see it disappear from the page which is perfect. So now we've looked at a whole bunch of different examples for how to use WP Query to customize your loop. Remember, this is a really powerful function and can give you just about any sort of query you want on your page. When you're using this query, though, it's important to remember that you have to reset the post data, so you want to make sure that you call that reset function either before your custom loop if you have a loop above it, or after your custom loop if there'll be another loop on that page or template. So you can see that we've looked at quite a lot of examples of what the WP Query function can do. Although we've used most of these case by case, you could also combine all of them to make even more powerful queries. Remember, though, that when you're using this, you want to make sure that you reset the post data either before your posts, if you have another loop on the page or template, or after your posts, if you have another loop or page on your template later on in the code. If you have questions, the best place to go is over to the Treehouse forums, where you can get help from myself as well as other Treehouse members and teachers. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this workshop on how to use the WP Query function to create custom loops in WordPress.